Maya Chen had always been different from other children in her small mountain village. While other kids played with dolls and toy cars, she spent hours drawing strange symbols that seemed to appear in her dreams. Her grandmother often found her staring at the old stone tablets that decorated their family's ancient house, tracing the mysterious markings with her tiny fingers. The villagers whispered about the Chen family's unusual heritage. They spoke in hushed tones about Maya's great-grandfather, who had disappeared into the mountains 70 years ago, claiming he heard voices calling him to another world. Most people dismissed these stories as local folklore, but Maya's grandmother knew better. She had kept the family secrets locked away in her heart, waiting for the right time to share them. On Maya's 16th birthday, everything changed. She woke up to find her bedroom filled with a soft, golden light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The light came from nowhere and everywhere at once, making the air shimmer like heat waves on a summer day. As she sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes to make sure she wasn't dreaming, the light began to form shapes and patterns that looked familiar. The symbols from her dreams were floating in the air around her, glowing with that same golden radiance. They moved slowly, gracefully, like dancers performing an ancient ritual. Maya reached out to touch one of the symbols, and, the moment her finger made contact, images flooded her mind. She saw vast landscapes that defied imagination. Mountains that reached into purple skies, forests with trees that sparkled like jewels, and cities built from materials that looked like crystallized starlight. But, most striking of all were the creatures that inhabited these realms. Beings of incredible beauty and power moved through these visions, and, among them, dragons soared through skies that held 3 moons. The images stopped as suddenly as they had begun, leaving Maya gasping and disoriented. The golden light faded, but one symbol remained floating above her bed. It was different from the others, more complex and detailed. As she studied it, she realized it wasn't just a symbol at all. It was a map. Maya stumbled out of bed and rushed to her grandmother's room. She found the old woman sitting by her window, looking out at the mountains with tears in her eyes. Without turning around, her grandmother spoke in a voice filled with both sadness and relief. "So it has finally begun, little dragon heart. I wondered when your gift would awaken." Maya's grandmother, whose name was Li Wei, had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She led Maya to the basement of their house, to a room that Maya had never known existed. Behind a hidden door covered by hanging tapestries lay a chamber filled with ancient books, scrolls, and artifacts that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Your great-grandfather didn't disappear, Maya," Li Wei explained as she lit candles around the room. "He was called to serve as a bridge between our world and the 5th realm. The dragons of that realm had been trapped there for centuries, unable to return to the other dimensions where they belonged. They needed someone from our world, someone with the gift of realm walking, to help them find their way home." Maya learned that their family had been guardians of interdimensional knowledge for over 1,000 years. Each generation produced one person with the ability to travel between realms, though the gift often skipped several generations before manifesting again. The responsibility was enormous, and many who received the calling never returned from their journeys. Li Wei showed Maya ancient texts written in languages she had never seen but somehow understood perfectly. The books told of 5 realms that existed parallel to their own world. Each realm had its own unique properties and inhabitants, but they were all connected by invisible threads of energy that ran through the universe like a vast web. The 5th realm had once been a place of incredible beauty and harmony, where dragons lived in partnership with other magical beings. But something had gone wrong centuries ago. A great catastrophe had severed the realm's connections to the others, trapping its inhabitants in a slowly dying world. The dragons, being the most powerful beings in the 5th realm, had taken responsibility for finding a way to restore the broken connections. "They cannot leave their realm on their own," Li Wei explained, her withered hands trembling as she turned the pages of an ancient book. "The magic that keeps their world stable depends on their presence. If they all left at once, the 5th realm would collapse completely, destroying everything and everyone in it. That's why they need a realm walker, someone who can travel between worlds and help them repair the connections one by one." Maya felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was learning. The idea that she had some kind of supernatural ability seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of her. The symbols, the visions, the strange dreams she'd had all her life suddenly made perfect sense. But, why me? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a regular teenager. I don't know anything about magic or other realms or dragons. Li Wei smiled sadly and placed a gentle hand on Maya's cheek. None of us ever feel ready for our destiny, child. Your great-grandfather was a simple farmer who loved nothing more than tending his vegetable garden. But, when the calling came, he found the courage to answer it, just as you will. Over the next several days, Li Wei taught Maya everything she knew about realm walking and the responsibilities that came with the gift. Maya learned meditation techniques that would help her focus her abilities, studied maps of the various realms, and practiced with artifacts that would aid her in her journey. The most important of these artifacts was a pendant that had been passed down through their family for generations. It looked like a simple piece of jade carved into the shape of a dragon, but, when Maya wore it, she could feel energy flowing through her body like warm honey. The pendant would serve as her anchor to the human world, ensuring that she could always find her way back home. Maya also learned about the dangers she would face. Traveling between realms was not like taking a vacation to another country. The very act of crossing dimensional boundaries put enormous stress on the human body and mind. Some realm walkers had been driven insane by the experience, while others had become lost between worlds, neither fully in one realm nor the other. Even more dangerous were the guardians that protected each realm from unwanted intrusions. These beings were not evil, but they were incredibly powerful and would not hesitate to destroy anyone they perceived as a threat. Maya would need to prove her intentions were pure and that she had the right to enter the fifth realm. As her training progressed, Maya found herself changing in ways that went beyond just learning new skills. Her senses became sharper, allowing her to see and hear things that had been invisible to her before. She began to notice energy patterns in everything around her, from the way sunlight filtered through leaves to the subtle vibrations that emanated from every living creature. Most remarkably, she started to hear whispers in languages she didn't recognize but somehow understood. These voices belonged to the dragons of the fifth realm, calling out across the dimensional barriers that separated their world from hers. They spoke of hope and desperation in equal measure, pleading for someone to help them save their dying realm. The voices grew stronger each night, and Maya knew that time was running out. Li Wei confirmed her fears, explaining that the fifth realm was deteriorating more rapidly than ever before. If Maya didn't act soon, it might be too late to save it, and the dragons would face extinction. 3 weeks after her 16th birthday, Maya made her decision. Standing in the hidden chamber beneath her house, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wisdom and magical artifacts, she declared her readiness to accept the calling. Li Wei wept openly, knowing that she might never see her granddaughter again, but she also felt proud beyond words. Remember, Li Wei said as she helped Maya prepare for the journey, the dragons of the fifth realm are not like the creatures in fairy tales. They are ancient beings of immense power and wisdom, but they are also capable of great emotion. They have been suffering for so long that some of them may have lost hope entirely. You must show them that healing is possible, that their realm can be saved. Maya nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. She wore the jade pendant around her neck, carried a small bag of supplies that Li Wei had prepared, and held in her hand the symbol that had appeared in her rune weeks earlier. According to the ancient texts, this symbol would serve as a key to open the portal between realms. As midnight approached, Maya stood in the center of the chamber and began the ritual she had memorized. She spoke words in an ancient language, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The air around her began to shimmer, just as it had in her bedroom, but this time the effect was much more intense. A doorway of pure light appeared before her, its edges crackling with energy that made her skin tingle. Through the opening, Maya could see glimpses of the fifth realm, towering crystal spires, forests that seemed to be made of living starlight, and, in the distance, the silhouette of a creature so magnificent that it took her breath away. A dragon, larger than any building Maya had ever seen, circled above a city of impossible beauty. Its scales reflected the light of 3 moons, creating patterns that shifted and danced like aurora borealis. As if sensing her presence, the dragon turned its massive head toward the portal, and, for just a moment, their eyes met across the dimensional divide. Maya felt a jolt of recognition, as if she had been waiting her entire life for this moment. Without hesitation, she stepped forward into the light, leaving behind everything she had ever known to begin a journey that would test every ounce of courage she possessed. The portal closed behind her with a sound like thunder, and Maya found herself standing in a world that defied every natural law she had ever learned. The air itself seemed alive with magic, and, in the distance, she could hear the ancient song of dragons welcoming her to their realm. Maya's first moments in the fifth realm left her speechless with wonder and terror in equal measure. The ground beneath her feet felt solid enough, but it seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, as if the entire world had a heartbeat. The sky above her stretched in impossible shades of purple and gold, with 3 moons hanging at different phases and casting overlapping shadows that created patterns of light she had never imagined. The air was thick with magic that she could taste on her tongue, sweet and electric like the moment before lightning strikes. Every breath filled her lungs with energy that made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before, but also left her slightly dizzy as her human body struggled to adapt to the realm's supernatural atmosphere. As her eyes adjusted to the strange light, Maya realized she was standing in what appeared to be a garden, though unlike any garden from her world. The plants around her were crystalline structures that chimed softly in the wind, creating melodies that seemed to respond to her presence. Trees with trunks of polished silver stretched toward the sky, their leaves shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. In the distance, she could see the city she had glimpsed through the portal. Spires of what looked like frozen starlight reached impossibly high into the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solidified music. The architecture defied gravity and logic, with buildings that twisted and curved in ways that should have been structurally impossible but somehow appeared perfectly stable. Maya had been standing in the garden for only a few minutes when she heard the sound of massive wings cutting through the air above her. She looked up to see the dragon she had seen through the portal descending toward her, its enormous form blocking out one of the moons as it approached. The creature landed with surprising grace a short distance away, its claws barely disturbing the crystalline ground. Up close, Maya could see that the dragon was even more magnificent than she had realized. Its scales were like mirrors that reflected not just light but also emotions and thoughts, creating a constantly shifting display of colors and patterns across its hide. The dragon's eyes were ancient beyond measure, filled with wisdom and sadness that spoke of centuries of watching its world slowly die. When it spoke, its voice resonated not just in Maya's ears but throughout her entire body, as if the words were being carved directly into her soul. "Welcome, Realm Walker," the dragon said, its voice carrying the weight of mountains and the gentleness of falling snow. "I am Zephyros, guardian of the crystal peaks and keeper of the ancient songs. We have been waiting for you longer than your kind has walked the earth." Maya found her voice, though it sounded small and fragile compared to the dragon's majestic tones. "I'm Maya. My grandmother said you needed help, that your realm is in danger." Zephyros lowered his massive head until his eyes were level with Maya's, studying her with an intensity that made her feel as if he was reading every thought she had ever had. "Your grandmother spoke truth, young one. Our realm has been severed from the great web of existence for 7 centuries. Each day that passes, the connections grow weaker, and our world fades a little more." The dragon gestured with one wing toward the distant city, and Maya could see that what she had taken for beautiful architecture was actually something far more desperate. The spires were not made of frozen starlight but were actually crystallized dragon magic, created by the inhabitants' desperate attempts to hold their world together through sheer force of will. "We have poured our life essence into maintaining the stability of this realm," Zephyros explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But we are not meant to be anchors. We are creatures of wind and sky, of freedom and exploration. The magic that keeps us alive requires us to soar between worlds, to carry stories and songs from one realm to another. Trapped here, we are slowly becoming shadows of ourselves." Maya could see the truth of his words in the dragon's eyes. Despite his magnificent appearance, there was a weariness about Zephyros that spoke of a spirit being slowly crushed by the weight of responsibility. She understood now why the dragons could not save themselves. They were sacrificing everything they were to prevent their world from collapsing completely. "What happened?" Maya asked. "What caused your realm to become disconnected?" Zephyros was quiet for a long moment, his scales shifting through shades of deep blue and silver as he remembered painful events from long ago. "There was a war," he finally said. Not a war of armies and weapons, but a conflict between the forces that govern reality itself. Two cosmic entities, beings of such power that they existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, engaged in a battle that lasted for millennia. The dragon began to walk slowly through the garden, and Maya followed beside him, marveling at how his massive form moved with such fluid grace. As they walked, Zephyros painted a picture with his words of events so vast and terrible that Maya struggled to comprehend them. The war had been fought on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. As the cosmic entities battled each other, their conflict created ripples that spread throughout the dimensional web, severing connections and isolating entire realms. The fifth realm had been caught in one of these ripples, cut off from the other dimensions just as a ship might be separated from its fleet during a storm. At first, we thought the separation would be temporary, Zephyros continued. We believed the connections would restore themselves naturally once the war ended. But the damage was more severe than we realized. The pathways between our realm and the others were not just broken but had been sealed by the aftermath of the cosmic battle. Maya learned that the dragons had spent centuries trying to find a way to break the seals and restore the connections. They had studied ancient magic, consulted with the wisest beings in their realm, and even attempted to force their way through the dimensional barriers by sheer magical power. Nothing had worked. The turning point had come when the eldest of the dragons, a being so old that she remembered the creation of the realms themselves, had a vision. In her dream, she saw a bridge of living light connecting their world to the others, and at the center of that bridge stood a human child with the power to walk between dimensions. That vision gave us hope, Zephyros said, his scales brightening slightly. But it also told us that we would need to wait, perhaps for centuries, until the right person was born in your realm. We have been calling out across the dimensional void ever since, hoping that our voices would reach the one destined to save us. As they talked, other dragons began to appear in the garden. They came from all directions, landing gracefully among the crystalline plants or emerging from hidden paths between the silver trees. Each one was unique, with scales of different colors and patterns that reflected their individual personalities and abilities. Maya met Lyralii, whose scales were the color of deep ocean water and who specialized in the magic of healing and growth. There was Thornwick, whose dark green hide was marked with patterns like living vines and who served as the keeper of the realm's natural laws. Celestine appeared like a living constellation, her scales sparkling with tiny points of light that matched the patterns of stars in dimensions Maya had never seen. Each dragon shared their story with Maya, and she began to understand the full scope of the crisis facing the fifth realm. It wasn't just that they were trapped, their world was actively dying. Without the constant flow of energy from the other realms, the very fabric of their reality was beginning to unravel. Plants that had grown for millennia were withering away. Bodies of water that had once connected to infinite oceans in other dimensions were shrinking and becoming stagnant. Even the three moons in the sky were showing signs of instability, their orbits gradually decaying as the gravitational forces that held them in place weakened. We estimate that we have perhaps a year before the deterioration becomes irreversible, Celestine told Maya, her voice like wind chimes made of starlight. After that, even if the connections were restored, there would not be enough of our realm left to sustain life. The enormity of the responsibility that had been placed on Maya's shoulders was overwhelming. She was 16 years old, had never traveled farther than the nearest town to her village, and now she was expected to save an entire dimension filled with beings of immense power and wisdom. But, as she looked around at the dragons gathered in the garden, she saw something that gave her courage. Despite their fear and desperation, despite the centuries of isolation and the slow decay of everything they held dear, they had not given up hope. They had continued calling out across the void, believing that someday help would come. What do I need to do? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Zephyros smiled, an expression that was both terrifying and beautiful on his massive features. The seals that trap our realm are not simple barriers. They are complex magical constructs that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. To break them, we must perform a ritual that requires both dragon magic and the unique energy signature of a realm walker. The ritual would involve Maya traveling to specific locations throughout the fifth realm, places where the original connections to other dimensions had been strongest. At each location, she would need to work with a different dragon to perform a complex magical working that would weaken the seals incrementally. It will be dangerous, Zephyros warned. The magical energies involved are powerful enough to tear apart an unprepared mind. And there are guardians at some of these locations, beings that were placed there during the original sealing to ensure that the barriers could never be broken. They will not hesitate to destroy anyone they perceive as a threat to their purpose. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, but she also felt something else, a growing sense of determination that surprised her with its intensity. These magnificent beings had been suffering for centuries, slowly dying while they waited for someone to help them. How could she possibly walk away from that responsibility? "When do we start?" she asked. The dragons looked at each other with expressions of amazement and gratitude. They had hoped for a willing ally, but Maya's immediate acceptance of the challenge filled them with a joy they had not experienced in decades. "Tomorrow," Zephyros said. "Tonight, you must rest and allow your body to adjust to our realm's energies. The journey ahead will test every limit you possess, and you will need all your strength." As the other dragons departed to make preparations for the ritual, Zephyros led Maya to a dwelling that had been prepared for her. It was a small structure made of the same crystalline material as the plants in the garden, but formed into walls and a roof that provided shelter while still allowing the magical energies of the realm to flow freely through the space. Inside, Maya found furnishings that had been crafted specifically for a human visitor. There was a bed that somehow managed to be both soft and supportive, despite being made entirely of crystallized dragon magic. A table held food that looked like nothing she had ever seen but smelled delicious and seemed to promise nourishment on a level that went far beyond the merely physical. As she prepared to rest, Maya stepped outside one last time to look up at the three moons and the impossible sky of the fifth realm. Tomorrow, she would begin a journey that would either save this beautiful world or destroy her in the attempt. For the first time since stepping through the portal, she allowed herself to feel afraid. But, alongside the fear was something else, excitement. Whatever happened in the days to come, she would be part of something larger than herself, something that would matter in ways she was only beginning to understand. As she drifted off to sleep in the magical dwelling, Maya dreamed of flying through starlit skies on the back of a dragon, carrying hope to worlds she had never imagined. Maya awoke to the sound of singing that seemed to come from the very air around her. As consciousness returned, she realized the melody was created by the interaction of wind and crystal throughout the Dragon City, a natural symphony that welcomed each new day in the fifth realm. The three moons had shifted positions during her sleep, and their combined light painted everything in shades of silver and gold that made the world look like a living painting. Zephyros waited for her outside the crystalline dwelling, but he was not alone. Beside him stood another dragon, smaller than the Great Guardian but no less magnificent. This dragon's scales were the color of autumn leaves, shifting between deep reds and brilliant oranges with touches of golden yellow that seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "This is Ember," Zephyros said as Maya approached. "She will be your companion for the first part of our journey. Her magic is particularly suited to working with the ancient seals, and she has volunteered to share the dangers that lie ahead." Ember lowered her head in greeting, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and determination. When she spoke, her voice had a warmth to it that immediately put Maya at ease. "I have been preparing for this day for 50 years, young Realm Walker. It will be an honor to work alongside you." Maya felt overwhelmed by the trust these powerful beings were placing in her, but she also felt a growing confidence that had nothing to do with magical abilities or ancient knowledge. The dragons believed in her, and somehow that belief was becoming part of her own strength. After a breakfast of crystallized fruit that tasted like condensed sunshine and left her feeling more energized than any meal ever had, Maya joined Zephyros and Ember for their departure to the first seal location. The other dragons of the city had gathered to see them off, their combined presence creating a sense of ceremony that made the moment feel both solemn and hopeful. Celestine approached Maya with a gift, a cloak made from what appeared to be woven starlight. "This will protect you from the worst effects of the magical energies we'll encounter," the star-scaled dragon explained. "It was made by the weavers of the second realm before the connections were severed, and it carries within it the power to shield its wearer from dimensional distortions." Maya accepted the cloak gratefully, marveling at how something that looked so delicate could feel so substantial and protective. When she wrapped it around her shoulders, she immediately felt its power surrounding her like a second skin, creating a barrier between her human consciousness and the overwhelming magical forces of the dragon realm. Their first destination was the Whispering Canyon, located 3 days' flight from the Crystal City. Maya had never imagined she would travel by dragon, and the experience proved to be both terrifying and exhilarating beyond anything she could have prepared for. Ember was surprisingly gentle as she helped Maya climb onto her back, positioning herself so that Maya could sit just behind her neck where the ride would be most stable. The dragon's scales provided natural handholds, and her body heat kept Maya warm as they climbed into the alien sky. Flying through the fifth realm was like traveling through a living dream. They soared over forests of glass trees that chimed in harmonious patterns as the wind passed through them, creating music that could be heard for miles. They crossed rivers of liquid light that flowed uphill in defiance of gravity, carrying boats made of crystallized song that moved without any visible means of propulsion. In the distance, Maya could see other cities inhabited by the various races that shared the fifth realm with the dragons. There were settlements built into the sides of floating mountains, their inhabitants moving between different levels on bridges made of hardened rainbow light. Gardens suspended in midair bloomed with flowers that released seeds of pure energy, creating swarms of tiny suns that danced through the atmosphere before taking root in the sky itself. But, everywhere Maya looked, she could also see signs of the realm's slow decay. Some of the glass trees had lost their ability to sing, standing silent and colorless among their healthy neighbors. Rivers that should have flowed with liquid starlight were running thin and pale, their banks lined with the crystalline remains of plants that had withered away. Most heartbreaking of all were the dragons they occasionally saw in the distance, perched motionless on mountain peaks or floating in the air with their wings spread wide. These were dragons who had poured so much of their life essence into maintaining the realm's stability that they had entered a kind of magical coma, their consciousness focused entirely on the great working that kept their world from collapsing. There are hundreds of them scattered throughout the realm, Ember explained when she noticed Maya staring at one of the motionless figures. The eldest and most powerful of our kind, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the rest of us. If we fail in our mission, they will never wake up again. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on Maya's shoulders, but she also felt her determination growing stronger. These creatures had given up everything for their world and their people. She would not let their sacrifice be in vain. On the second day of their flight, they encountered their first real danger. As they flew over a region called the Fractured Peaks, where mountains had been shattered by dimensional instabilities, they were attacked by creatures that Ember called void wraiths. These beings appeared out of nowhere, materializing from tears in reality itself. They looked like shadows given substance, with eyes that burned like dying stars and claws made of crystallized despair. Maya later learned that void wraiths were created when the magical energy of a dying realm began to turn in on itself, creating entities dedicated to accelerating the process of decay and destruction. The attack came without warning. One moment Maya was admiring the strange beauty of the broken landscape below, and the next she was clinging to Ember's back as the dragon twisted and dove to avoid the wraith's claws. The creatures moved through the air with impossible speed, their forms shifting and blurring as they darted in and out of dimensional folds. Ember fought back with bursts of flame that burned with colors Maya had never seen before. Each blast of dragon fire that connected with a void wraith caused the creature to shriek in a voice like breaking glass and retreat momentarily into the dimensional tears from which it had emerged. But there were too many of them, and more kept appearing as the battle continued. "Hold tight," Ember called back to Maya as she executed a spiraling dive that left Maya's stomach somewhere far above them. "I'm going to try something desperate." Instead of continuing to fight the void wraiths individually, Ember suddenly pulled up from her dive and began flying in a complex pattern through the air. As she moved, her scales began to glow brighter and brighter, and Maya could feel heat building along the dragon's back that was almost too intense to bear, even through her protective cloak. What Ember was doing, Maya realized, was drawing upon the deep magic that connected all dragons to the fundamental forces of their realm. She was calling up power that was normally reserved for the great workings that held their world together, and using it as a weapon against the creatures of void and entropy. The result was spectacular and terrifying. A dome of pure dragon magic exploded outward from Ember's position, washing over the void wraiths like a wave of liquid sunlight. Where the magic touched them, the shadow creatures simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but rather corrected out of existence, as if reality itself was rejecting their presence. The effort left Ember exhausted, her scales dulled and her breathing labored. They were forced to land on one of the fractured peaks to rest, and Maya spent the next several hours helping the dragon recover by sharing some of the magical energy she had absorbed from the realm's atmosphere. "That was foolish of me," Ember said once she had regained her strength. "Using that much power for a battle could have weakened the overall stability of our realm. But, if those creatures had overwhelmed us, our mission would have ended before it truly began." Maya understood the terrible calculation the dragon had made. Every use of major magic in the fifth realm had to be weighed against its potential cost to the overall stability of their world. The dragons were walking a tightrope, trying to accomplish their goals while avoiding any action that might accelerate the collapse they were working to prevent. They reached the Whispering Canyon on the third day, and Maya immediately understood why this location had been chosen for the first seal-breaking ritual. The canyon itself was a wound in the landscape, a massive crack in the earth that descended so far into the realm's depths that the bottom was lost in swirling mists of pure magical energy. But it wasn't the canyon's size that made it special. As they descended toward the ritual site, Maya began to hear voices carried on the wind. Thousands upon thousands of voices, speaking in languages from across the dimensional spectrum. These were the echoes of all the communications that had once flowed between the fifth realm and the other dimensions, trapped in this location when the connections were severed. "The voices are memories," Ember explained as they landed on a ledge halfway down the canyon wall. "Every conversation, every song, every story that was shared between our realm and the others is preserved here in crystallized form. If we can unlock this location and restore its connection to the dimensional web, we can use these stored communications to help guide the other realms back to us." The ritual itself was more complex than anything Maya had imagined. It required her to place her hands on a series of crystal formations that jutted from the canyon wall, each one attuned to a different dimensional frequency. As she made contact with each crystal, she had to open her mind to the alien energies it contained while simultaneously maintaining her connection to her own realm through the jade pendant her grandmother had given her. The experience was overwhelming. Through the crystals, Maya could feel the presence of beings from realms she had never imagined. There were creatures of living music from the third realm, entities of pure thought from the seventh dimension, and beings of such alien nature that her human mind could barely comprehend their existence. But she also felt something else, their loneliness. Each of the other realms had been damaged by the cosmic war that had severed the connections between dimensions. They were all struggling in isolation, cut off from the rich exchanges of knowledge, culture, and magical energy that had once flowed freely between the worlds. As Maya worked with the crystals, Ember provided the dragon magic necessary to actually break the seal. The dragon's power flowed through Maya's human consciousness, guided by her unique ability to navigate between dimensions. Together, they created a bridge of living energy that reached out through the dimensional void, seeking the corresponding anchor points in other realms. The moment of success was unmistakable. Maya felt a connection snap into place with an almost audible click, and, suddenly, the Whispering Canyon was filled with new voices. Real-time communications from beings across the dimensional spectrum flooded into the canyon, bringing with them streams of magical energy that had been absent from the fifth realm for centuries. The effect on the immediate area was dramatic. Plants that had been withered and gray suddenly burst into bloom with colors that had no names in Maya's language. The crystal formations that lined the canyon walls began to sing in harmony with voices from distant realms, creating music that made Maya's heart soar with joy and hope. But, most importantly, Maya could feel the overall stability of the fifth realm improve measurably. The constant drain on the dragon's life essence was reduced, if only slightly, as natural energy from other dimensions began to flow into their world once again. "One down," Ember said, her scales brighter than Maya had ever seen them. 6 more to go." They spent that night camping in the canyon, listening to the conversations and songs that flowed between realms and languages both familiar and utterly alien. Maya fell asleep to the sound of a lullaby being sung by a mother in the second realm to her child, the melody somehow finding its way across dimensional barriers to comfort anyone who needed to hear it. Over the following weeks, Maya and various dragon companions traveled to the other 6 seal locations scattered throughout the fifth realm. Each location presented its own unique challenges and dangers, testing different aspects of Maya's growing abilities as a realm walker. At the Singing Cliffs, she worked with Lyralii to restore connections to realms where music was a fundamental force of nature. The ritual required Maya to harmonize her own voice with the dragon's magical songs while standing on the edge of a precipice where one false note would have meant falling into a chasm filled with crystallized sound waves sharp enough to cut through steel. The floating gardens tested her ability to work with living magic, as she and Thornwick had to convince an entire ecosystem of sentient plants to participate in the seal-breaking ritual. The plants spoke through scent and color patterns that Maya had to learn to interpret, and they were initially suspicious of the human visitor until she proved her commitment to helping rather than exploiting their realm. At the Mirror Lakes, Maya faced her greatest personal challenge when she had to confront manifestations of her own fears and doubts that were created by the location's reality-reflecting properties. With Celestine's help, she learned to accept the parts of herself she had always tried to hide, understanding that her human limitations were not weaknesses but rather the source of her unique strength as a bridge between worlds. The most dangerous location was the Shattered Tower, where the Void Wraiths had their strongest presence. Here, Maya and a team of 3 dragons had to perform the ritual while constantly under attack by creatures that sought to prevent the restoration of dimensional stability. The battle raged for 3 days and nights, with Maya having to maintain her concentration on the complex magical working even as chaos erupted around her. But, perhaps the most emotionally difficult location was the Garden of Memories, where the dragons had preserved the essence of everything they had lost when their realm was cut off from the others. Walking through rows of crystallized moments, Maya experienced the grief of an entire people who had been forced to watch their world slowly die while being powerless to save it. By the time they reached the 7th and final location, Maya had been transformed by her experiences. No longer the uncertain teenager who had stepped through a portal of light, she had become someone who moved between worlds with confidence and grace, comfortable with powers that would have terrified her months earlier. The final seal was located at the heart of the realm, a place that existed at the exact center of the 5th dimension where all magical energies converged. Here, surrounded by all the dragons of the realm who had gathered to witness the completion of their great work, Maya performed the most complex ritual of all. This final working required her to simultaneously connect with all 6 of the previously restored pathways while opening herself completely to the fundamental energies that held the 5th realm together. For a terrifying moment, Maya felt her human consciousness stretched across multiple dimensions at once, experiencing existence from perspectives that no single mind was meant to contain. But, then, Zephyros was there beside her, lending his ancient strength to help her maintain her sense of self while wielding power that could reshape reality. Together with all the dragons of the realm, they created a working of such beauty and complexity that it restored not just the final seal but also repaired much of the damage that centuries of isolation had inflicted on their world. The moment the last connection snapped into place, the 5th realm exploded with light and life as magical energy from 6 other dimensions flooded back into a world that had been starving for centuries. The 3 moons brightened until they outshone the sun, the crystal cities began to sing with voices that could be heard across the dimensional spectrum, and dragons who had been trapped in magical comas for decades began to stir and awaken. Maya found herself lifted into the air by dozens of dragons, their joyous roars creating a symphony that echoed across multiple realms simultaneously. She had not just saved a single world, she had restored connections that would benefit countless beings across the dimensional web. As the celebration continued around her, Maya felt a gentle tugging sensation in her chest. The jade pendant her grandmother had given her was calling her home, reminding her that she had her own realm to return to. She had accomplished what she came to do, but, more than that, she had discovered who she truly was. The dragons gathered for her departure, each one offering her gifts and blessings for her journey home. But, the greatest gift came from Zephyros, who presented her with a single scale that had separated naturally from his hide during one of their most challenging battles. With this, the great dragon said, "You will always be able to return to our realm, no matter how far your travels might take you. You are no longer just a realm walker, Maya Chen. You are a bridge between worlds, a guardian of the connections that bind all of existence together. The 5th realm will always be your second home." Maya accepted the scale with tears in her eyes, understanding that she was saying goodbye not just to friends but to a part of herself that would always belong to this magical world. But she also knew that this ending was really a beginning. She had learned to walk between realms, and there were countless other worlds that might someday need her help. The portal home appeared as a doorway of silver light, created by the combined magic of every dragon in the realm. As Maya stepped toward it, she turned back one last time to see Zephyros and all her dragon friends watching her with expressions of love and gratitude that would stay with her for the rest of her life. "Until we meet again," she called to them, her voice carrying across the dimensional winds to every corner of the fifth realm. Then, she stepped through the portal and found herself standing once again in her grandmother's basement, surrounded by ancient books and artifacts that seemed almost mundane after the wonders she had experienced. Li Wei was waiting for her, tears of joy streaming down her weathered face as she embraced the granddaughter who had left as a frightened teenager and returned as something far greater. Maya spent the next several hours telling her grandmother about everything that had happened, showing her the dragon scale that Zephyros had given her and describing the incredible transformation she had witnessed in the fifth realm. Li Wei listened with wonder and pride, knowing that her family's ancient calling had been fulfilled in ways that exceeded her wildest dreams. But, even as Maya settled back into her life in the mountain village, she could feel the call of other realms echoing in her heart. The skill she had learned, the connection she had made, and the confidence she had gained were not meant to be used just once. Somewhere across the dimensional web, other worlds were facing their own crises, other peoples were crying out for help that only a realm walker could provide. Maya Chen had found her purpose, and it was larger than any single world could contain. She was no longer just a girl from a small mountain village. She was a guardian of the spaces between worlds, a protector of the connections that allowed magic and wonder to flow freely through the universe. And, somewhere in the fifth realm, dragons soared through skies filled with 3 bright moons, singing songs of hope that carried Maya's name across the dimensional winds to anyone who needed to hear that bridges could be built between any two worlds, no matter how impossible the distance between them might seem.